Thank you for listening to Serves You Right. My name is Andrew, and today I'm talking to Fred Provenza. Now, Fred is world-renowned for the work he did on nutrition in animals, understanding the wisdom and intuitive nature of how we eat and what Mother Nature has set up for us. So, super excited for the talk. Super awesome guy. I did want to film this introduction as well, because I wanted to let everyone know that for the foreseeable future, we are going to go down to a 1 episode per week cadence. So look out for that, and I will update you all if we go back up to 2 a week. And yeah, rock and roll. All right, here's Fred.
So how you doing, Andrew?
I'm doing great. We made it back from Denver safe, so it was great.
Good for you. And you got to see your favorite band, you said?
Metric, yeah, they were awesome. Colorado is a beautiful state. It really is.
Honest to goodness, I was born and raised there in the central,
Salida,
in the mountains,
right?
in the mountains, in Salida. Yeah, Salida.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, Spanish should be pronounced Salida, but the locals, it's all Salida. So,
yeah,
it's beautiful.
It's funny how that works in America sometimes.
Right. Well, that's right. No appreciation when it comes to those kinds of things.
Yeah. Well, thanks for taking a little time out of your day to come chat with me.
Yeah, I'm
Really
happy to
appreciate
do it, Andrew. I was actually
Yeah.
kind of surprised. I see how you got in touch with me through the Dorito effect and Mark, huh?
Yeah, Mark Schatzker. He's a very interesting guy. It was a lot of fun kind of digging into his work, but you play a very prominent role in a lot of that. So
I got to tell you, Andrew, and that's been years ago now, huh? They go
yeah.
quickly. But when Mark was writing the Dorito effect, it was like reliving my career. I had already retired by then, but he
Oh
had
yeah.
so many questions. He did a nice job in the Dorito effect of capturing the essence of some of what we did. He really, I give him credit, honest to goodness, but he was into it big time. I mean, he takes it very seriously, huh?
Well, if you had been watching humans and not goats, perhaps you'd have written a very similar book. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm telling you, it gets complicated with humans, so no question, huh? No
Oh
question
yeah.
about it. And the further you try to go down that path, my goodness, it's yeah, it's mind-boggling. I interact with a number of people who work with humans, and
Hmm.
I almost feel sometimes like a psychiatrist. There's one medical doctor I work with who's very non-conventional, I would say, in his approach of trying to deal with fundamental problems, not symptoms and pills and procedures and those kind of things when it comes to diet. But I think it's just so overwhelming for him sometimes. It's so frustrating, both with trying to change the behavior of people, but also with people trained classically in the medical profession, medical and pharmaceutical industries. They're not looking at the world the same way he's looking at it, huh? And the things that he's trying to do. So I can sense his frustration, but I often tell him, every person that you help, that's a big deal. You're not going to change the world. I mean, it's maybe a little
Yeah.
not. I shouldn't talk like that, right?
Well,
But
to every
honestly,
person, we're all in our own heads. We're all this myopic universe anyways. So to that one person, you did change the world.
that's right. That's right. And that's a big deal. So I think his frustration sometimes he'd like to try to change things more broadly. And that's a big job, huh? That's a big job. But people are
It's
talking
huge.
about it and thinking about those things nowadays too, right?
They are. They are.
The
And
absolute horrific quality of our diets, the ultra processed junk food that my wife and I often think back to when we were growing up. People were so skinny, Andrew. I'm telling you, so skinny. You look at them now and you think, geez, they were malnourished. They weren't. And it's
no,
simply
no.
that all this happened within, I've been on the planet 75 years. All this happened within our lifetime. It's stunning. It's really stunning to see what's happened.
Well, I mean, you can't really see past here, but I'm getting close to 40. So for the first time in my life, I have a little bit of like a punch. Not much. And it's probably been about a month. I said something offhand about how I was hoping to, get in a little better shape and just lose a little bit of that excess weight that I've gained. And someone else around me, and I'm not going to name names or anything, but it's like, what do you mean excess weight? And it's like, for me, this is beyond what I like. And I know that I have, I know the winter I ate the cookies, I did the things, so it goes. Uh, but because it is so normal to have such a degree, people will hear me saying that, and it's almost like an insult to them. And it's like, no, I didn't mean any insult. For me, this is beyond what I like.
No,
It's,
I understand.
yeah,
That's right,
yeah.
and it becomes the norm then, right? I mean, we don't. It's simply normalized. And I think you're not judging, and I'm not judging either. Things are the way that they are, right? I mean, they are the way
Mhm.
that they are, and then, but a person can reflect on those things and in a non-judgmental, non-critical kind of way. I probably shouldn't even say this, but my my wife and I have a son and a daughter-in-law who are way into weightlifting
Mhm.
and in competing and coaching the high school team. So it's a wonderful thing for both of them. And we like to go to their meets when we can just to support them, just to go and see. And I would think that those people there would be just rippling with muscle, right? And some are, but a lot are just so incredibly obese. It's beyond belief. And I lift weights, not competitively, just strength, you know, try
Oh,
to
sure.
keep
Yeah.
this whole body going, basically.
Yes. Trust me, I'm not going to become a fitness influencer, but I lift what I have to make sure I don't fall apart, kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's what I do. But I often think when I'm carrying weights, if I weighed I weigh 140, so there's not much here, but
Mhm.
that's what I weighed when I was in high school, actually, and in college. So I'm at that weight. But I think, what if I weighed another 60 pounds? So when I'm carrying 60 pounds around, I think this would it be to walk around if I weighed 200 pounds. And it lets you realize that you have to be pretty strong to carry all that around like
Sure, sure.
huge
Yeah.
legs. And anyway, I don't know where you want to go with the podcast. If this is
No, no, that's perfect. Yeah, I was just thinking I'm up the high 190s, but I'm also 6'2", so that does add a little bit.
right,
But
and I'm
yeah.
much, I'm 5'7", so a
Oh
lot
yeah.
shorter than you are. That makes a big difference. Yeah.
It's what every American says, I've got big bones. But yes. No, no. I think it would be helpful. We just kind of started talking, so I don't mind if we just keep rolling. I
I
think a
don't
lot of
either,
people.
Andrew.
Yeah.
You know your audience, you know what you'd like to do, and
Yeah.
I'm totally open to whatever. I just got a kick out of when I saw who you were, what you did. I thought that's really interesting to that you got in touch with me. But then I understood through Mark is how you might,
Yeah. Well,
how the way that would have been the contact. Because otherwise, yeah, I wouldn't have known.
who is this guy? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Nah. No, we'll get into it, but there's so much, you spend your whole life, a large portion of the population serves or is in some way related to the food service industry. And you'd be surprised by how few people think about what like they do and its connection to nourishment. And like, so that was what led me to start thinking about bringing you on. But I think before we get to that, before we put the cart in front of the horse, I'm sure there are a bunch of people listening who maybe don't know you. So would you be willing to give us kind of a brief overview of your past and how I ended up finding you, which I could jump
Yeah,
into, but yeah.
sure. No, I'm happy to do that. Well, as we were saying earlier, I was born and raised in the mountains of Colorado, in central Colorado, in those beautiful mountains. And for me as a child growing up, just absolutely fascinated with wild creatures, from insects and fish to birds, you name it, if it was alive. I loved it. And that led me after high school to Colorado State University, where I majored in wildlife biology, which was fabulous for me. At the same time, and much to my surprise, I started working on a ranch. I'd never done that before. And that ended up feeding hugely into what I did. And this whole idea that we'll probably get into of food, where it comes from, what's the plight of farmers and ranchers, reading about that all the time. So anyway, when I finished at CSU, I knew I didn't want to be I wouldn't be a wildlife biologist. I don't know how I knew. I just knew that's not going to be, but I didn't know what I was going to do.
Unsubscribe from that for sure. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, I think that's maybe not so uncommon either for when you're trying to figure out your path, huh? Your life path, what you're going to do. So I went back to the ranch and ran the place for a couple of years. When I was there, I found I was really missing learning about plants and animals and ecology and all that stuff. Even though at the time when I finished at Colorado State, I said, I think I've had enough formal education for a lifetime. But then I was missing it. So I thought, well, I'll go to grad school. Didn't have a clue about any of that. Ended up going to grad school. Realized I absolutely loved research. And so ended up getting a PhD and then working at Utah State University for 35 years, basically, and studying. What amazes me now, Andrew, looking back, is to think really when I was on the ranch and look, I love plants, plant identification. I mean, that's a whole world. It's incredible if you start looking at wild plants. And then
We're never ever going to let you in the same room with my wife, or we will just you two will never stop.
she
she's
loves it.
she's the no, she's the big green thumb in the house. Yeah, for
Well,
sure.
give her a big hug for me. You know,
Yeah.
but that world, and what interested me is just why do what do animals eat? Mountain goats and wild creatures, what do they eat? And just that could have been a career for me, just following them around. But where it led has been the total surprise for me. I never would have guessed that we would end up studying the things that we studied. Um, and basically, when I think of nutritional wisdom, which is what we ended up studying, that there's a wisdom to the body. If you step back and think of that, though, and it virtually never gets talked about in human beings or till our work in domesticated animals. What people thought with goats, sheep, cattle, anything with pigs, whatever, chickens, is that after 10,000 years of domestication, they'd lost that ability. They no longer had the ability to know what their body needs and to select for that. Well, that's what we were able to show over the years, over and over. 300 papers we published, not bragging, but just saying we published a lot of studies on that stuff, looking at all facets. And there were three legs to the stool. One is these transgenerational linkages. That's where I don't blame in humans too. You look at someone that's obese and you think, well, what did the mother eat? And what did the grandmother eat? Because all that's being passed down and genes are being expressed epigenetically, influence form, function, behavior. So we did a huge amount of work on how mother, starting in utero, mother's influence early in life and as adult, the influence of mother and extended families play in the food and habitat selection of creatures. That's one leg to the stool. The other that's a surprise to people, and it was to us too. If I ask you, Andrew, why do you like a particular food? What do you tell me?
Because it tastes good.
Yeah, don't overthink it. Don't. And
Uh-huh.
why don't you like it? Doesn't taste good. And that's true. But what we were learning that was just totally new and different is that it's feedback from cells and organ systems, including the microbiome. Nowadays, people are talking about the microbiome changes your liking, right? It's not just the microbiome, it's every cell and organ system in your body that's feeding back to alter your liking for the flavor of food as a function of need. That's what we studied. We did so much work on that for energy, protein energy ratios, minerals, vitamins, you name it.
Hmm.
We were looking at those kind of things, and then medicines. Then we got into the whole idea of can animals self-medicate. So that's a second leg to the stool. And that's what fine tunes it to the individual. So mother is a guide, but you're not your mother.
Nope.
You're going to be a little different. You're right. I mean, in terms
Yeah.
of form and function, you're different and from her. And so that's what fine tunes it to the individual as a function of need. The third leg to the stool is the availability of nutritious alternative foods. That's where diversity, plant diversity, and what your wife sounds like.
Yeah.
Having a diverse array of plants and animals learning to utilize that diverse array is just fundamental to. And if you break any of those legs to the stool, you're not going to see nutritional wisdom manifest, basically. So, that's, I never would have guessed in those days when I was simply saying, boy, I'd love to follow a mountain goat around in the peaks of Colorado, seeing what they eat. I never guessed in a million years where all of it would lead, which is kind of reflective about a life, right? I mean, as you look
It is.
back, as you think back over your life and you think, oh my goodness, how I never would have anticipated where this would lead or that or the other, which is a beautiful thing, huh? Beautiful thing about the life as it unfolds. If you can embrace the mystery of it.
Yeah, no, it is awesome. And you sent me you did a recent speech is on cosmic dreamings. The one quote you didn't include in that I would have thrown in as Kierkegaard, life has to be lived forward but can only be understood in reverse. And it sounded a lot like what you were saying throughout the whole thing, but
It
yeah.
absolutely is. That's a great quote. That is a great quote. You'll send it to me. I hadn't heard it before.
Oh,
Actually,
sure,
I
sure.
should have, but send it to
Oh,
me.
I'll send that
Yeah,
to you.
yeah, sounds good. Well, if you did read it, and I didn't mean to, I had read a little bit about what you were doing. I thought, well, maybe be interested, but it wasn't meant that, okay, you have to read
Oh
this
no.
thing. But if
No,
you
no,
read
no,
to
no.
the end, you saw my wife and I celebrated our 50th wedding anniversary a couple of years ago.
Yes. No,
That that quote is so much, when we went there, we were working on the ranch at the time that we were married. We didn't have the time or the money for a honeymoon. So we went for a one-night camping trip, backpacked into the head of this beautiful drainage, Mount Uray and Chipeta on each side, Indian chief and his wife, named after them, the head of this drainage. And so we hadn't been back there in 50 years. That's what was amazing. We went back there for our 50th honeymoon, our anniversary on that day, and hiked in there and looked. And I was just thinking, there is no way that a person could ever imagine, any of us, how their life's going to unfold, huh? And you think back over it, and
hmm
yeah, it's amazing.
it is wild. Yeah. Um, so I do hope we can talk a little bit about some of the different like specifics with you and kind of the animals and kind of the things that you saw when you were trying to sort of put together ending up with these tripart division of what nutritional wisdom is. And the first one that came to mind, and I thought it was such a good story, I think it was you were trying to deprive the goats, I think it was phosphorus, and you were failing because as they were getting low in phosphorus, they were finding ways around and they were beginning to self-medicate themselves and treat themselves to the nutrients they needed. So it was almost hard to deprive the animals of a specific mineral. So do you mind
Oh,
telling us about that a
absolutely the
little?
case.
Yeah.
Well, that's right. So we were asking the question, if animals are phosphorus deficient, can they learn to select a food that has phosphorus in it? And we were monitoring blood phosphorus levels as an indication of whether they were deficient or not. And we had the group that was eating the diet that was replete, had the phosphorus in it, and then the group that
Mhm.
didn't. And we had them in individual pens, and they were adjacent to one another. This is the key to what happened. And we couldn't get blood phosphorus levels to drop in the group that was supposed to be deficient. We went out there and started watching. Where were they getting their phosphorus? They were eating the poop of the animals that were in the adjacent pens that were phosphorus replete. So that's
Mhm.
where they'd fit. And that's not uncommon for animals to eat highly unusual. I'm thinking right now of cattle in the Netherlands that were confined to pastures that were deplete in phosphorus, that they had low phosphorus levels in the soils, and they started to eat dead rabbits. That was a source of phosphorus. And if they would shoot rabbits in this study and offer them, those cows would eat it. Cows in the adjacent pastures, weren't interested in the least. Digging up soil and eating it's another example. So animals innovate when they're challenged with deficiencies. Um, they start to sample new and really unusual kinds of foods. And when they hit upon something that works, bingo, they form a preference for it. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
It makes tons of sense. And it reminded me, it's a story I remember seeing on TV when I was a young kid about a guy who was stranded on a boat and it was for like 4 or 5 weeks. And so he could only catch fish and waiting to get saved. And during that time, he actually developed a taste for different parts of the fish that we normally don't eat. Like he was eating fresh fish eyes, fresh, like, because his body was kind of making him interested in this food. And then as he ate it, I forget what nutrient he was deficient in, but he was like, oh, and like he ended the experience with like, yeah, like I actually do like fish eyes now. And it's like, you don't think about the fact that if you were stuck in the middle of the like ocean and only eating the typical parts of the fish that you catch, eventually your body's going to say, I need something else. And it'll kind of push you to try it.
That's absolutely the case. That's putting into words, no doubt, what all the animals were experiencing in the many different studies that we did. We started with phosphorus, we looked at calcium, sodium, other kinds of things, and then we would have them experienced. This is what's so interesting to me in terms of being in tune with your own body. Um, so they would learn to rectify a phosphorus deficiency, say eating apple flavored straw, and a calcium deficiency eating maple flavored straw. The flavor is the cue, right? But then
Hmm.
the key thing is that they learn how to rectify the deficiency, then make them deficient in one mineral or another, and then offer them the different food, the different flavored straws, right? And they go for the straw, the flavor of the straw that rectified the deficit. Does that make sense?
It makes tons of sense. Like,
Yeah, so they're doing what the guy on the in the ocean was, right?
mhm.
And the whole thing too, that's so important. It's not a cognitive, rational, analytical part of the brain that's involved here. It's the non-cognitive, intuitive, synthetic part of your being that's telling you, so to speak, right? It's not,
Yeah.
it's like after you eat a meal, how much time do you spend thinking about which enzymes to release to digest the food you just ate? You don't. Right? Well, most people don't. But
Yeah. You might. Yeah, but no.
I know.
Yeah.
It's a key point. It's a wisdom. It's a wisdom of the body, but it can be overridden by the cognitive, rational, analytical part of and I see that. I think that all the time. And this isn't to disparage or to be, we're all constantly being told what we should and shouldn't eat, what supplements we should and shouldn't take. And I often think, how many of us ever would even have a clue to just stop and listen to the wisdom of our own body? But also, that third leg of the stool, you need to be on wholesome foods, right? You have to, it doesn't work if you're eating junk food
Hmm.
that's
Yeah.
been
Twinkies
manufactured.
aren't giving you any good
No,
feedback.
no,
Yeah.
they're not. I over the years, it was great fun. I obviously went to jillions of conferences, and conferences where there'd be people, everything from people studying rats to goats, us, and on to human beings. And when you looked at the principles and processes, we were basically talking about the same ideas.
Hmm.
But I used to listen to those human researchers talk and just think, that's amazing. That's where the money is. Nobody cares about goats or sheep or cows per se, right? Per
The
se. But
multi-billion sheep diet industry. Yes. Yeah.
right. It's that, and the way they would talk about shaping up those foods to basically get you and me and everybody else hooked on that stuff. It's like, wow. that was before I realized quite so much. I mean, as I went along, I was realizing, this really isn't very good, but it was fascinating to listen to those
Hmm.
and to think we're all talking the same principles and processes and how you do this stuff and how you get it to be a part of the culture, basically, right?
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, for a young human before it's even born, it's already hooked on junk food, absolutely hooked. It comes out a lot, pre-diabetic and on and on and on.
Mm.
It's a mess that's been created. So that whole idea, and then you get to another issue where agriculture went. We selected for yield, totally for yield. Um, so we've got some tomatoes right now, and we've got some peaches, and they look great. I mean, the tomatoes couldn't look better. Those peaches couldn't look better, and they couldn't be more worthless if you tried. There is no nourishment in that. How do I know? Do I have to take it to a lab test? No, I have this analyzer right here and it tastes that. It's like, don't waste my time with this stuff. There is nothing here. There is no flavor whatsoever. We grow a bunch of our own food and I can't wait for our tomatoes to get ripe and stuff. But that accent on yield is really, it's a bugger because then you think, well, why would a young child want to eat this stuff when it has no flavor whatsoever?
Hmm.
The whole idea of wholesome foods, how those foods are grown, um, that's a huge deal and a huge challenge. Huh? How do you get nutritious fruits, vegetables, meat, if you like to eat meat, all those, how do you get really nutritious, flavorful? And of course, that's what Mark Schatzker's talking about in his
That's
book Steak and then in the Dorito Effect. I mean, that was the whole point of those books is where we've gone. But boy, it's such a key point.
no, and it is a crazy thing because it is farming like directed by accountants almost. And I mean, no knock on accountants. My brother's an accountant. But maybe a better way of saying it is farming by Excel. Like you see the amount of time that you hold on to the thing, and it's like as the time goes on, your costs increase, and so why not have it mature early, get it out the door, start again? And there's that counter argument of, I'm big in the beverage world, so like whiskey. Like no one celebrates like quickly aged whiskey. There are things that just are a function of time. There are, and flavor's one of them. It seems, you know.
Yeah, absolutely the case. And um, we recently had some friends from South Africa here, and they're into whiskey actually big time. Each evening they'd
Mhm.
have a little, and I was learning so much talking with them that I didn't know, and that you would know in spades about the making of fine whiskey, and
Fine
on and
whiskey.
on
They
and
get a
on.
lot of
Just a lot
Chenin
of the
Blanc down there. Yeah, they do. They do a lot of
a
good
lot of
stuff
the
down there.
nuance, a lot of the new, and it makes perfect sense, huh? And then you get into the terroir of all of these sorts of things too, huh? Of where that comes from. It's yeah, absolutely, absolutely the case related to flavor, and then linked with feedback, and the absolute importance of nutritional quality, of high nutritional quality, and when it comes to the plants, and we're learning to the meat too, and we don't need to go too far down this, but the complexity. If you eat fruits and vegetables that have been raised on good soil, good varieties, they have not only protein and energy and minerals, but this whole array of these other compounds, phytochemicals, what I refer to them as,
Hmm.
the tens of thousands of those things that the plant world produces that we're learning more and more are so foundational to the health of all the creatures in the system, certainly with livestock when they're eating diverse arrays of species, antioxidants, anti-inflammatory, immune boosting. They can be used to get rid of internal parasites, on and on and on. There's so many benefits, and then we're learning more and more about the benefits to humans as well. So, um, but you don't get that if you're simply selecting for yield. Um, back in the days when Mark was writing the book, and I talked to him about this, if we would go out and we would forage on native plant species, and the
Oh,
different,
cool.
maybe, 5, 10 plant species in the fall of the year that would be producing all these different kinds of berries and stuff. And there was a richness of flavor to those things, a richness of flavor, not just sweet. That was the point I was trying to make with my word, not just sweet. It's there's a richness and a punch to the flavor of those things, and that's coming from this phytochemical diversity. That's really important for our health. And why do we like it? Why do we like the flavor of it? I would argue it's feedback from cells and organ systems that are saying, "Hey, this is good stuff," So it alters your liking for the flavor of the food as a function of what feedback is how cells and organ systems vote, basically.
Yeah, yeah.
You want to think of it like that. That's how they vote. And I don't want to beat this to death, but it's not just the microbiome, and not we're not just feeding the microbiome. If that's all we were feeding, the brain has certain needs, your muscles have certain needs, your organ systems, and so it's
I'm sorry to interrupt. This will be fast, I promise. Please take a moment and leave a comment on the show. It really would mean the world to me. Let me know what you're thinking. Let me know what we're doing well and what we could improve on. I'd love to hear from you all. All right, back at it. There's that famous story. I forget the kid's name, but there was someone who, had some injury, some sickness. I forget exactly how it happened, but he had to have something installed where they could essentially just put food in where he wouldn't have to chew it. And this is back in the day. It was one of those things where he was losing weight and very unhappy. And finally he's like, can I chew the food just to taste it? And all the problems that he had went on. And it's that flavor is, and even with the goats, you flavored it with the mango, and that way that's how we learn. And, I'm
that's right.
thinking, the quote from Schopenhauer, man can do as he will, but not will as he will. You,
Yes,
you, you can't, like you point this out really well in the book The Nourishment. Your body will learn lessons when you get sick, even if it's not connected to the food that you ate, because you are so primed to learn these lessons, because that's how your ancestors were safe, and that's how you stay safe. And like, if something weird happens and you get sick after eating fried chips, and you know you're not eating that again for a while.
that's absolutely the case. You bring back memories of yeah, you get seasick when you're on a boat and you've been eating. It's a seasickness, but your body's associating it with the food, huh? And I told the
Mm,
story of the Golden Burrow in Leadville, eating a
yeah.
meal there after a ski race and getting really sick, and you know, avoiding roast beef and mashed potatoes and so on for a long time after that. Come to find out, though, it was contaminated water at the ski area where we were skiing that made all of us sick. It wasn't that food, but the body's set to associate what you
Mm.
ate with that ensuing illness. It's that's right. And again, that's that wisdom of the body, that non-cognitive, intuitive, synthetic grounding of our being. That's so important, I think. That I think uh, that amazes me more than anything else, to see how that's virtually never ever mentioned in human nutrition, in human health. Of how do you get in tune with your own body, in that sense, the wisdom of your body, both physically, and then a person could talk spiritually as well. How do you get in tune with that? How to get in tune with that? Tune into that.
Well, that is one of the reasons I do think that the alcohol industry has kind of held on to a like just a space in the world and in the conversation that is almost outsized for what it is. And like, to explain that, like, you know, one thing I always think about, they didn't stop serving the toddy, rations for the English Marines until like 1991 or something. And like, you think about that, that means that there were people like near and operating nuclear submarines with like a little bit of booze in their system. And like, that's pretty terrifying. But as far as food and drink substances go, I think that alcohol has this weird, like wine is a great example, where even with all the industrialization, and it's not immune, there is some of this, but because it is so, like, it's grown on these, purposefully grown on places that are hard to grow anything else, it's almost immune to that. Like, no one's celebrating their yield on their grapes, like it's almost designed to be slow, low yield, high flavor. And so even though people acknowledging that drinking is not the healthiest thing, there are health risks, it seems to just hold on. It's just like it seems this ancient thing, but we still have it because it has flavor. It's one of the few things that held on to flavor as we get into the 20th century and the 21st century. And it's still holding on. Like,
Yeah, it
if that makes
absolutely
sense.
has, and that's a wonderful thing in the sense that we're talking, right? It's a wonderful thing,
Yeah.
and just give the examples of the grapes and where those grapes were grown on harsher sites or whatever, and um, so much work. So we're talking about plant identification and learning plants. That's kind of
Mhm.
a first step. But then the next step is to learn about how plants behave and how the roles that all these compounds they produce play and how they're influenced by the site where they're growing. That's amazing. And I think the people who grow grapes, certain ecologists got into that big time during the early years of my career and for many years. That was
Mhm.
a big area of interest. And how does sunlight, nutrients, water, and so forth influence the chemical characteristics of plants, the phytochemical richness of plants? And I've often thought that people growing grapes for wine and so forth must be really very knowledgeable about those kinds of things, huh? And how that's influencing the flavors of the wines that they're producing and so forth.
Well, the really beautiful thing about it, I think, is like the best people out there, the ones that are the revered sites, they have the explanations they can give, but there is kind of a consensus that it's about 70% things we know, and then 30% kind of like, you know, how is this one vineyard dry farmed in Napa when everything else isn't? It's like it just works. Because there is kind of a wisdom in the plant, and the plant adapts. And yeah, it's, in our backyard, there are places that arugula will grow and other places it'll grow okay. And then some places where we have different plants, and like you just never know. And there's a whole
That
system beyond what you can know.
that's absolutely the case. And from all the work that ecologists did and that we were doing as well, it's a pretty safe bet that the chemical characteristics of that arugula are going to differ on every one of those cases. And what was
Hmm.
amazing to us was animals figure that out in no time flat. Animals figure that out in no time flat of which ones they prefer. Huh? If you grow species of plants that are high in tannins, that produce a lot of tannins, and you grow them on a really harsh site, the tannin concentrations are going to be much higher in those plants than
Hmm.
they are if you grow them on a fertile site. And all you have to do is ask the goat or the sheep or the cow which one's which, and they'll tell you
By which one they eat. Yeah.
by which one they eat, and they'll go for the one that's lower in tan and lower has lower tannin
Mhm.
concentrations. Tannins. This is a detail. They're carbon, what's called carbon-based compounds, and when plants are growing on soils that are low in nutrients, um, they're producing carbon, but that carbon can't go into growth because they don't have the nutrients they need to grow. If that makes sense.
Oh, yeah. So they just
And so
send it this way. Yeah.
exactly. And so they shunt it into tannin. And so the tannin, there's there's just such a rich literature in ecology that was back in the, let's say, the 70s and 80s and into the 90s, where people were so looking at those kind of things and looking at different compounds. And we were into that too. And the animals, it was the animals at first, I think, guided us in a sense, huh, to that. And then you could get with natural products chemists and analyze the hell out of it and whatever you wanted, and I mean, you could see these differences and you could work with that. But the animals were figuring that stuff out, figuring it out. And we were learning from the plants and learning from the animals too. It was that was that was wonderful to me to just be out there and to be observing plants, observing animals, and then trying to learn from them, huh?
Yeah, the ancient wisdom that they have without all the
Absolutely.
extra. Yeah.
And then
It remind Oh, you go, please.
you think of our indigenous ancestors, and they wouldn't have known all the different names for tannins, terpenes, oxalates, nitrogen, phosphorus, blah blah blah, on and on and on. But they knew they had an experiential knowledge of all that, right? They had an experiential knowledge of that, and that's that wisdom of the body knowledge that
Mhm.
I think is so vital that we've lost. They had that experiential knowledge gained from generation to generation to generation. And I think we've got the scientific knowledge, but I think we've lost in many ways that really fundamental experiential knowledge.
Hmm. Well, that's a cool thread to pick on. Do you have any prescriptive advice how someone listening to this might be able to get closer to the nutritional wisdom or practices that could help someone kind of rekindle this in them?
You know, let me throw out some ideas. This isn't meant to be
Sure.
dogma or anything else either, Andrew. It's just,
You must
you
eat
know,
bananas and do not pass. Yes.
exactly, exactly. I think as a general statement, and this is what my wife and I did over the years. We realized that, so much of the food that's at the store is ultra processed kind of things, aisle after aisle after aisle. Michael
Mm,
Pollan's written a bunch about that sort of thing. Um, and so we decided that's where it starts for us. We don't even buy that stuff because if we bring it
mm.
home, it's too damn hard to resist it. I mean, it's incredible the way they've created these things
Yeah,
that are so incredibly appealing.
I've found that I have two modes, and I've found this in other people too. I can eat zero cookies or I could eat all the cookies, but eat one, leave the rest. That is not a setting I have in my head. Yeah.
It's exactly right. There used to be a potato chip ad when I was back ages ago, like, but I bet you can't eat just one, you can't
Oh
eat just
yeah.
one. So we decided none of that comes home. We don't even buy it. We try our best to buy wholesome foods. That can be the challenge, though, of fruits and vegetables and meats and so forth. And surround ourselves with that and eat that, as a first step. One of the challenges I see now visiting with this medical doctor that I do is so many people are pre-diabetic or diabetic, I mean, just metabolically very, very unhealthy to the point where, we like to talk about eat fruits. Variety of fruits are good for you, but fruits will spike glucose like a son of a gun. So if you're pre-diabetic or diabetic, there's a whole bunch of foods that you probably can't even eat. He works a lot with carnivore based kinds of diets. That's where he's gone with that. Eat vegetables and eat meat, and because of the influence of whole grains, even of fruits, anything that spikes glucose and insulin and
Hmm.
just exacerbates the problem. And that, you think, boy, there's you what you can do becomes very, very, very restricted. Huh? Of course, now we've got all the LPG-1
Oh, a whole
plethora,
other mix in. Oh
plethora
yeah.
of plethora of those hormone replacement kind of drugs that so that's where the pharmaceutical and medical industry has gone a lot. Yeah, I don't know. It's a challenge, but that's what my
Yeah.
wife and I have done is just to say, we're not bringing any of this stuff home. And sometimes I really get a kick out of picking up some big old cakes and stuff and putting it in the basket when we're shopping together. And Sue looks and freaks out. I did it one time. An old lady was there watching. She laughed. She thought it was funny as hell.
Well, yeah, I think that is a good principle. And, I've heard that kind of worded in the past where it's like if your grandmother, great grandmother wouldn't have recognized it as a food, probably shouldn't eat it. Like, you know, and there is a world of difference too between buying a store cake and from scratch, from, good ingredients, making a cake yourself in, without all the preservatives, without all the artificial flavors, without all the blah that they've found that is almost as addictive as some drugs that's they're legal to sell to children in the aisle. Yeah. So,
Yeah, it's absolutely
mhm.
the case. You know, another thing that ever since we were dating, Sue and I loved growing gardens. We were raised around, that's something that's changed a lot. You know, when I was a young kid growing up and looking at great grandparents and grandparents, they still grew big, wonderful, wonderful gardens. They
Mhm.
had chickens. They would raise a hog, some of them. When it got to my parents' generation, less and less of that. My generation, that's kind of gone away. But that was another thing that put people in touch with actually nurturing something that's going to nourish you. And with, when you grow it yourself from good varieties, the flavor of that is just, it's off the charts. We had some young neighbor kids that were next to us, and we would give them things out of the garden. And it was amazing to see how they would just rave. Oh, those carrots were so delicious. What did you, how? Well, it's just good varieties that you grow yourself and you pick them when they're ripe, and they just, the flavor's just
That's it.
incredible.
Yeah, yeah. No, and it is so interesting that that has gone by the wayside. And so I've seen it in two ways. So we were talking before, like at the beginning, just went to Denver. And one thing I really like about Colorado is it seems like there is a push to sort of do away with a lot of the yards and go more in the direction of a plethora of plants. And I noticed it because here in Omaha, we kind of have we have to adhere to the lawn in the front. And it is what it is. Some places are like that. But our backyard, if you thought it was going to look like the front, you'd be wildly wrong because it is an explosion of different plants and all different things all over the place, which we have barley growing back there. We have tomatoes and we have, like it's exactly what you'd expect for a small garden in a house, but it's a garden. It's something we couldn't do in the front, but you do it in the back, so.
Absolutely. And that's, that's just taking advantage of an opportunity to do those kinds of things, huh?
Mhm.
I mean, everybody's situation is going to be different, obviously, what they can and can't do. Here where we are in Ennis, Montana, we're on an acre and a half of ground, and for much of that, we've simply let the native species that grow here, we've encouraged them. The place was nuked when we got here, but there
Mm.
were remnant patches. We took seed from that, we planted the seed, and it's so we've got mainly native plants. It's a rock pile where we are, so we have deep beds that we grow. I'm just saying, building on your point, that each situation's unique, and if it's something that would resonate with you, then you need to figure how to do that for you and for your family.
Mm, for sure. Fred, I feel like I could talk to you for 2 days, and I'm afraid if I don't say this now, I probably will. Is there somewhere, if someone was listening, where they could go to find out more about you, the work you've done? Do you have a website or anything like that?
You know, I've been retired 17 years now, Andrew, and
Mhm.
for years we had a program called Behave, and there was a fabulous website that some of the people that worked with me had put together. Um, but they're all long retired now. So the short answer is no. I don't have a website. I'm not on
Oh no.
Facebook. I'm not on anything. I don't do a thing at this. I'm not saying
Yes.
against any of that. I'm just um, the I did do a book called Nourishment, and I did an audiobook adaptation of Nourishment. So
Okay.
those would be probably the most user friendly.
Awesome. Well, I'll make sure we include those in the show notes because that is how, I kind of dug into your work. And do you mind if I link to the what is it, the Cosmic Dreaming?
No, no,
Oh
that's
yeah.
fine. I'll have to say the first time I gave that talk, and I sent you a transcript of that's evolved
Mhm.
over the years, was 2 years ago at a festival here in Montana that's related in a way to what we're. It's called the Old Salt Festival. It's in
Mhm.
western Montana, and it's like a 3-day camp out there. It's on a ranch. It's beautiful, rolling countryside and mountains. And what they're trying to do is reestablish connections between people and local food and livestock. Cattle is an important part, but the whole idea of local food and so forth and so
Mhm.
on. And so I was asked to give a keynote related to our linkages with landscapes and one another and so forth. And so I gave that there. But I've been interested how many times I've been asked to give that talk now. Actually, I'm going to give it again on Friday to
Well,
an audience in Australia.
it
And
is
I
a good
think
talk. Yeah.
I think it just resonates with folks the what's the reflections that are in that. So no, I don't mind if you put that at
Awesome.
all.
Well, Fred, I am sorry that I do have to go, but it was a pleasure having you on. It was a real pleasure to get to meet you.
Yeah, same for me, Andrew. Wonderful to meet you, and best of luck with all the things that you're doing too.
I appreciate it.
You at your stage, you're the future. You guys are the future. I think that absolutely. So best of luck and um, keep at it the best that you can.
Cheers. Thank you for listening. That is today's episode. Now, if you have not taken a moment to check out our website, please do. It's servesyouRightPod.com. We have past episodes and all sorts of other things there. If you want to get in touch with me, that's the place to do it. I do appreciate that you've given me your most valuable asset, your time and attention. So thank you for listening and stay tuned. We have some really cool guests coming up. I would hate it if you missed it. Cheers.